Hi! I'm so glad to see you all again. I hope that you have had a lovely week, and I have had an absolutely great week. If you don't remember the video from last week, in last week's video I told you that I was trying to have a real week where I immersed myself into the world of birds. I really wanted to see what it felt like to be a bird because I really feel strongly that they are one of the best animals out there. So I had a great week. I did a little vlog for you so you could join me, and here's some of the things I got up to this week. Singing like a bird. Caw! 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 Nailed it! Eating bird food. Mmm. Mmm. Building a nest. Well, I finally reached the most important and the last part of my journey. And I'm glad that you're there with me as I finally learn how to fly. So I think I've mastered it. Fingers crossed that I don't sink like the Titanic. So I'm going to get a little bit of momentum going here. And a 3, 2, 1. Oh, my head. Oh. Well, I think it's safe to say that I haven't quite got that part sorted, but I'll try again tomorrow. Well, I hope you've enjoyed my experiment. I certainly have. Although you'll agree with me, there's some things I did better than others. But do you know what? Practice makes perfect, and that's what I'm just off to do now. So I'll see you again, okay? Hello everyone. Thanks for joining me again. Today I'm going to be speaking a bit more about the verse I started speaking about in the last video. So it is found in Hebrews chapter 4 and verse 15, and I am going to read it for you now. For we do not have a high priest who is unable to sympathise with our weaknesses, but one who in every respect has been tempted as we are, yet without sin. So we spoke a little bit in the last video about who the high priest is that this verse is speaking about. So this is Jesus that the verse is speaking about. He is a priest because he paid a great sacrifice for us, the sacrifice of his body and his life. And because he was perfect and he was God's son, this sacrifice was the final sacrifice, and we don't have to do anything more about our sins if we trust in him. He's in heaven now, and he lives there eternally with God. And he's our high priest because he carries out intercession for us, the word we spoke about last time. Intercession means to speak on behalf of someone else, and that's what Jesus does in heaven, where he speaks to God about us and he works on our behalf. So the second part of this verse is about having a high priest who sympathizes with us. Now, I don't know if you know what sympathize means. To sympathise with somebody means to feel what they are feeling. So if somebody is very sad, you might sympathise with them because you have had a similar sad occasion and you're able to talk to them about how they feel and to help them to feel better. So Jesus is able to sympathise with us for one big reason, because he was a human. He came to earth as fully God and fully man. Now, in my video from earlier, you might think I was being quite silly, thinking that I could know what it would feel like to be a bird by just acting like a bird. It is a silly idea. The only way I would know what it would be like to be a bird is if I sprouted wings and feathers and I was able to all of a sudden fly through the air with the rest of the birds. So the only way to know what it would be like to be a bird is to become a bird. And this is the same idea as what Jesus did. So Jesus became a human so that he could understand what it would be like to be a human and so that he could fully have the human experience. He could have just came down to earth as a human for a couple of weeks before his death, but no, he was in his mummy's belly and he became a baby and a child, and then he grew into an adult. So, why did Jesus do all this? Well, he did all this so he could know what it felt like, so that he could help us with things that we will experience in our lives. So, some of the things that Jesus experienced are very similar to what we experience. You only have to look in the Gospels at the start of the New Testament to understand this. And whenever I was thinking about this, I could think of a few examples. I thought about how Jesus experienced joy and celebration whenever he went to the wedding celebration in Cana, where he turned the water into wine. And then the opposite, well, he felt incredible, intense sadness whenever his friend Lazarus died. And we know that Jesus wept, Jesus cried whenever this happened. He felt anger whenever people disobeyed God. He felt loneliness in the Garden of Gethsemane when all his friends deserted him. And of course, he felt pain whenever he was dying on the cross. What's more, he also was tempted to do wrong things. But this verse says that he was tempted, but he never sinned. So Jesus was tempted when he went into the desert for 40 days, if you remember that story. The devil came and tempted him. The devil said, turn the stones into bread, or jump off the temple, and I will give you power and authority. And Jesus said no. And Jesus continued to say no to doing any form of sinning against God. Now, I know for certain there wouldn't be a day that went by that I am not tempted to do something and I say yes to temptation too often. And I'm sure you'll all agree with me that it's very, very difficult to say no sometimes. That's where Jesus's perfect life comes into play. Jesus's perfect life and Jesus's always saying no to temptation means that his sacrifice was perfect and was enough to cover all the sins that we have done. And every time we have said yes to temptation, and every time in the future we will say yes to temptation. But Jesus's perfect life and sacrifice was enough for us. So that's why I love this verse so much, because it reminds me that whenever I am feeling sad or scared or lonely, Jesus has felt all those ways. I'm feeling sad at the minute whenever I see the news, and I feel scared about the future, and I feel lonely whenever I haven't seen my friends in so long. But Jesus has been there and Jesus has got through it. And even though Jesus doesn't give me the answers, he does say to me that he'll be with me and he won't leave me and he'll get me through it. There's no prayer too small to pray to Jesus, because he has lived a full human life and he wants to hear about ours, and he wants to hear about the things that we struggle with and the things that we find hard to do and find hard to avoid doing when it comes to temptations. Jesus says to take all our burdens to him in prayer and to believe and trust that he will help us. So I hope that that's what you do. I hope that you pray to God about the things that you're feeling scared and sad about. And I hope you tell him all those things, because he does care. And I hope you remember that because he is in heaven, he is always looking out for us and he is talking to God on our behalf. So that even though we don't know sometimes how things will come about, but we know that Jesus is looking out for us and that he has said that all things are under his control. So I hope that you take as much comfort in this as what I do.